as it relates to farm impact and farming impact. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Minister. And Minister, I am one of the members who was awaiting your statement. I must say that the farmers in St. Catherine Northeastern, they have been adversely affected. Minister, will there be training from RADA to improve the resilience of our farmers and their capacity to respond? And I must say that in St. Catherine Northeastern, where we are served by the St. Catherine Parish Office, where there are constituents who don't have a RADA ID, they are not usually denied the assistance, but what RADA does is immediately sign them and have them on mainstream. Minister, can you remind us whether or not there are grants for those who lost infrastructure? Also, can we embark on discussions regarding insurance and other protective arrangements for farmers, such as those who lost poultry? We recall the PC Bank and its usefulness. Minister, most of our constituents live on a hand-to-mouth basis. There are deep rural, vulnerable constituencies who live on the farm, who live based on their produce. And so the slightest disruption in their livelihood can mean life and death. Can we look at the most vulnerable areas who contribute significantly to the national food basket and allocate resources and give them the much needed support? Thank you, Minister.
Manchester South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, are you aware that Manchester has consistently been one of the top 3 parishes for domestic food crop production? And are you aware that Southern Manchester represents more than half of Manchester in geographic size and domestic crop production? Given your favorable response to those first 2 questions, can we therefore anticipate a substantial and urgent response in terms of the allocation to kickstart production in Southern Manchester? And with respect to fishers, I welcome your announcement of the generator going to Alligator Pond to pump the fuel for the fishers. However, since your announcement, the councillor has been scouring the area and is yet to locate it. So you may want to check your sources. But the question is, Minister, last year, post-burial, when you gave out the relief checks, a number of the fishers who received it hadn't been to sea for some years. These organizations, I would say, are not vibrant. They're not very active, some of the farmers and fisher organizations. So when you look at the fishers and farmers of record, they don't necessarily reflect who are active currently. So I would just suggest in order to avoid the persons who are most active currently not being the beneficiaries, that you have your extension officers do some verification on the beach to ensure that it's those who will push out pretty much immediately who get the benefit. Thank you.
We will take the member from Clarendon Southwest, then the member from St. James. West Central, and you're fine. No more. I was actually taking the additional questions, so thank you. Go ahead.
Minister,
Time is almost 7.
are you aware that both plow tractors at RADA in Clarendon are inoperable? Inoperable. And this is having regard to your proposed program of free plow service. Will you consider engaging with private plow tractor operators and subsidizing that service to the farmers? Minister, you are aware that Southwestern Clarendon has perhaps a number of agro-parks, some of the best producing agro-parks in Jamaica. Ebony Park, Spring Plain, Panarsos, which was recently came on board. Can you say what percentage of these agro-parks are currently under lease? And if for those that are not under lease, what measures can be expedited to ensure that those lands are leased, because those lands are very arable? In terms of insurance, can you say thus far how many farmers have benefited under the Grace AgroCare? Because I remember we worked on that closely over the years. And how many farmers are to benefit, and what was the quantum of the amount that was given to the farmers as a result of the hurricane damages that they suffered? Those are my questions.
Thank you, member. Last, member from St. James West Central.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, is any consideration being given to utilizing new innovative approaches and technologies to producing vegetables and other crops within their growth cycles to ensure that supplies are available on the market domestically? Experts are saying that the crops within their life cycle and growth cycle can still be produced to ensure that the markets are supplied. Just wondering what consideration is being given within the ministry to those other technologies and innovative approach.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and thank you to our members and the wider range of questions, and I'll try to treat them as quickly as possible. I think just for context, in any weather event of this nature, the government does try to provide support to help our farmers get back on their feet. And in each event of this nature, there may never be enough support to reach every single farmer. And I think that is something that we all have to appreciate, right? That is a reality. Additionally, although sometimes it doesn't appear so, farming is private enterprise. And part of what we are consistently trying to do is to ensure that more of our farmers approach it from that perspective in terms of looking at their investments, looking at their returns. We do, however, know that in instances of this nature, where you get a sudden massive shock to any private enterprise that is so important in our food security chain, that some support will be provided. So I give that as a framework, and I will go through the questions quickly. The question of generators for farmers, something that has come up, especially in the poultry sector. As you can imagine, we have a wide array of small poultry farmers. So it is and would be a massive undertaking. About we are self-sufficient in poultry when we don't have weather events of this nature, and about 30% of what we produce is produced by backyard farmers. So the reality, you know, remember from Portland Eastern, if you go into a community, almost every household or every other household in some communities have those small poultry farms. So it is a little challenging. We would have to try and develop a framework maybe around farming groups, right? Working with the poultry associations and maybe working with some of our broiler companies to see how we could do a sort of public-private partnership around that. Something I'm willing to discuss and to explore. In our program, we started it in Hurricane Beryl. We do provide infrastructure support in our program, right? Again, we will try to ensure that each of the parish offices through RADA has some subvention in that regard. Probably won't do everybody, but as you all know, there are some, there are different size players, right, that are very critical. And as such, we will see how we do the beneficiary identification. Banana and planting, and I will mention this a number of times, but we are going to have a specific program outside of what I have indicated for banana and plantain farmers. We did it in Hurricane Beryl. It worked significantly, where we tried to provide direct support, especially in the form of fertilizer, form of chemicals, and we saw our banana and plantain industry get back up in the 7-8 month window. So it shows that if we provide the support, the farmers are willing to do what they need to do. So you will hear about that. And then I do know Portland Eastern is a big parish in terms of fisheries, so some support will be provided. In relation to St. Mary South Eastern, and this question came up a number of times, the way to ensure that farmers get benefits in these situations is to ensure that they register. There can be no going around it, because it also helps us with identification in terms of identifying who out there contributing. It helps us in terms of tracking the production numbers. It helps us to guard against glut and shortage. So say to our farmers, for all the members, go and register. As the member from St. Catherine North is highlighted, what we tend to do in these situations, if the RADA officer had known prior to that you were actively engaged in farming, and some of us know people who are actually medium-sized farmers but not registered, and you come in now, they take steps to register you. But I would say to all our farmers, register before these events. Sometimes the farm
Don't need a studio, just need a file, remove excesses.
you realize, because the reality, when the program gets taken by the Auditor General, the only thing we can use to identify the beneficiaries is the farmer's ID. No, the message to them, and I'm saying to members, you have to lead, We have to lead. And we have to say to our farmers, get registered. What I'm saying is where a farmer has a track record and is not registered and is known to the RADA officer, right? Then when that farmer comes, a facility will be put in place for that farmer to be registered. However, you see all the variables, which I cannot divorce those variables, because what you also don't want are people just turning up now to say they are farmers and they want a benefit because they lost. And in every weather event of this nature, you and I know, you hear somebody say a man come for a benefit and him not farming anything, right? So I'm saying, let us say to our farmers, let us use this to say to them, get registered. Now, I made a point earlier, so just to reiterate, yes, in any intervention of this nature, you will have some farmers who say that they registered, but they did not get a benefit. Clearly, what we try to do is to pool government resources, private sector resources to reach to as much farmers as possible. In Beryl, we did a good job of it. I think we were over 80%, almost 90%. That still means there's a 10%, right? So we will continue to try, especially to pool as much resources, and those of the private sector listening on, the more that we generate the mobilization of funds, the more farmers we can help. St. Mary's Central and all the issues in relation to tractors that are not working, I've taken note of them. We've come a far way. When we started this journey in 2016, there were 7 tractors in the RADA system. Most parishes did not have a tractor at all. We now have 22 tractors in the RADA system. Some, as you have highlighted, are down. I have heard a concern in relation to St. Mary's Central, but the answer to that is in the second question that you asked. Yes, we have actually procured some small tools. So remember, we had announced some programs, and those were in train prior to Hurricane Melissa. So some of those handheld tractors that are better for hilly terrain, we have some of those, and we will see how we deploy them. Caroline, I know your constituency is one of those that has that sort of terrain. Is the status of the new hatchery? It wasn't damaged. So we're happy for that. Still have some more work to do to complete that between JSIF and the National Fisheries Authority. So we will get that done. Determination of priority for farm roads. Yes, that is something that I will come back to the House on, right? Clearly, there are going to be competing priorities. I've told you how much the damage is. I've told you how much we are expecting from the Ministry of Finance. So we will have to look at some of the hardest hit parishes, quite frankly, because if you're familiar with some of those areas, some of the farm roads that even were recently done have suffered some damage. And what we don't want to do is to erode the gains that we have made. Grants, I don't know what I wrote with that. I'll come back to that. But definitely we will, this is Manchester Northwest. Goats and cows. So again, what we indicated was our immediate recovery program, right? There will be a broader program, right? It doesn't mean in every instance that we will provide an animal like we're doing with chickens. But it may mean, for example, speaking to the Ministry of Finance about extending the regime to allow our farmers to import those breeds that have been happening and that we imported over 1,200, most of them being to the private sector. So it may be something like that, and seeing how we could work with the DBJ to set up a facility that could facilitate that. So in some of those small ruminants and cows, it may have something like that. We already have earmarked a program to import dairy cows, right? And it's something that we will continue to look at. The tagging system, yes, we are ramping up our tagging system. So just to let our farmers know, our NATES, our Veterinary Services Division, is open for business. We are ramping up in the areas that we've had complaints about. We're putting more officers and boots on the ground. If you have lost your passports, we can issue those replacement passports. Please contact the NATES at 876-485-648-5672. That is the NAITS, N-A-I-T-S, NAITS, the National Animal Identification and Traceability System, right? It's 648-5672. St. Andrew Western, he is not here, but I did hear him about ramping up. We are going to have an urban farming project, which will focus on a lot of vertical farming using the modern tower type system. The member from St. James East Central asked about new technology in vegetable farming. We're going to focus on that. The member from St. Thomas Eastern, you've been doing very well. The constituency has been doing very well in terms of ramping up production. They are our biggest onion belt. We're about to roll out our onion program. Again, I will look at the farm roads in terms of priority, but bear in mind what I said earlier. St. and Southeastern, yes, urgency. So I did indicate that we want to start distribution of seeds this week, and I did indicate some specifics about enhancing how much lands we put on the production. He did ask where. Emony Park, the member from Clarendon Southwestern, will be one of the areas. So to what you asked, definitely if land is not leased, we're going to try and get leasers to come in. Outside of that, Parnassus is 100% lease. We're very happy for that. But what we're saying to the farmers now, if you're only producing on 20% of what you've leased, ramp it up. We're also going to be focused on Bernard Lodge. Clearly, we're willing to explore St. Anne. St. James Southern, there's no question, based on the damage that has been done and how productive you are, that you would be at the higher end of the spectrum. But just to all MPs, remember, this allocation, as with South Manchester, but this allocation is really because we do know that people come to MPs as the first port of call, right? It will help, but the more substantive allocation will come through other channels. So for example, you will benefit, your farmers will benefit from a banana planting program that we definitely will provide them with some support in terms of fertilizer and chemicals. Now that is normally administered through the banana board. So again, registration is critical, but most of them are. So we don't have that problem. And when we say seeds, it also includes planting materials. So you will hear as we go on other programs around things like yam. And we have heard the reports of seeing insects that they never saw before. We've asked our plant quarantine division to look at it. We've heard it from a couple of places. So in the support I announced, there's $30 million already for agrochemical support. St. Catherine Northwest is not here, but we've started the discussion with the DBJ in relation to those loan type arrangements and whether the DBJ can help. So we will continue on that. And I spoke about RAD and the proof of participation. Definitely animal houses is a part of the conversation, and we will come back to that. Training, St. Catherine Northeastern, absolutely. Training from RAD is going to be critical, especially also in the hardest hit areas where we are a little concerned whether the soil would have been negatively impacted. So we will have to take a detailed approach in relation to soil testing and in relation to training. Persons asked about the insurance. I was trying to pull up the figures, but definitely I think about 50 farmers are slated to benefit. And again, 90? Thank you, State Minister Whittle. 90 farmers. No, so, and they have communicated with us. In fact, there has already been a payout to 30 female farmers who registered as a part of the Rural Women Network. Again, it's a parametric scheme. So the payout is based on what your premium, what you would have paid, not the value of what you've lost. So if you pay $3,000 as your premium, your payout might be $50,000, $25,000. But I think this is again saying to more farmers, get themselves insured, because those payouts have started to happen already. In less than 2 weeks, those payouts have started to happen. Manchester Southern, we said the generator will be up by tomorrow. So if you don't see it by tomorrow, you call me. It's a one-day process, right? And yes, I take your point about the official, but we normally use, you have to be current on your license, right? I do understand, and I will take the point in terms of further verification. Some people may be current, it's a one-year license. Some people may be current, but might not be going to see. So I take that point. Clarendon Southwestern, tractors, St. James, new technology. I think I have dealt with all of those. So thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. Members, in an effort to ensure that we do not have to move a motion to extend the sitting, we are going to attempt to complete before 7:30. House Leader, would you be so kind to go back to public business so we can take the private member's motion from the member?
Madam Speaker, may we now recommit public business?
Those in favor? Those against, the ayes have it.
We will hear from the member from St. Catherine. Southwest.
Madam Speaker, on the 14th day of October 2025, I gave notice in this Honorable House of private members motion 1 to 6, and I wish to commend those. I'm asking that I just go through.
Go ahead, member.
Thank you very much. Private members, motion number 1 said, whereas the road infrastructure in most of the housing schemes in Jamaica are in deplorable conditions, and whereas these roads continue to deteriorate without any maintenance by government, and whereas such action by government results in severe difficulties and suffering for Jamaicans living in these housing schemes, and where these residents are taxpayers, most of whom are poor, less fortunate Jamaicans, be it resolved that Parliament calls on the government to immediately assume full responsibility for all road infrastructures and housing schemes throughout Jamaica and commence repairs and rehabilitation needed to bring all these roads in proper and usable conditions. And be it further resolved that in all future development, a condition of the developmental approval is that at the time of issuance of the first title to a homeowner, the titles to all road infrastructure and common areas be transferred to the local government, Kingston St. Andrew Corporation, or any other local authority, including but not limited to National Works Agency, in order that such entity can exercise the right of ownership, inclusive of maintenance. What does that mean, Madam Speaker? Is that you have housing schemes or development from 1951, Hurricane Ivan, and all of these housing schemes ever since then, they are not the responsibilities for maintenance are not assumed by government. And when you ask, government said those are development, they are not governmental scheme. I brought this here before, it went to cabinet before, it was sent to the then Minister Noel Ascott, who didn't deal with it. That's why I'm back here with it again. So I'm asking that government, that this Parliament calls on the government to take responsibility for all of these roads. Because the residents keep on calling on the parish councillors and the members of Parliament to assist in repairs. And we cannot do it because government has not assumed responsibilities. And I'm not coming to that later on. But I'm asking now that we cut this nonsense about these are not government roads, and that we as Parliament direct that the government takes responsibility for all of these roads. Private members, number 2 says, whereas Section 35, subsection 3 of Representation of People Act states that the elector shall forthwith enter the enclosed area of the polling center, so provided, and they mark a cross with a black lead pencil within the space containing the name of the candidate of his choice, and where there are other implements that can be used. Be it resolved that this Honourable House takes the necessary action to have the appropriate amendment done to Section 35, subsection 3 or Representation of People Act, provide that any implement that an elector finds appropriate or convenient to use to make the required mark shall be lawful. And be it further resolved that further amendment be made to the said Section 35, subsection 3 or Representation of People Act to make any mark on a ballot by an elector in the space containing the name of the candidate of his choice or the intent of the elector can be discerned shall be valid and not be limited to a cross. In the last election, in the election 2020, you have 284 ballots rejected in Southwest St. Catherine. The last election, we have 342 rejected. I understand there are constituencies where up to 600 ballots were rejected. There are some, you have 500, up some to close to 1,000 ballots rejected because they claim it was not a perfect X. You have a whole woman in the country who has a shaky hand and cannot do a clear, distinct ballot. They are rejected. You have cases where the presiding officers counted these ballots as being valid, but yet you have these new young lawyers from electoral office at the final count rejected these ballots and say you must take it to court. Why the hell you want to take it to court when they're ballots? What I'm saying, once the intent of the elector is there, it must be counted as a valid ballot. It must be counted. So I'm asking that this section be amended to put intent. Once the intent is there, the ballot must be counted. And you can have some young lawyers say must reject and go to court. Go to court for what? So I'm asking that we make this amendment. Revelation, private members 3, whereas section 41A, subsection 1 of the Representation of People Act specify that every candidate in an election may appoint such person as he thinks fit to be outdoor agent and shall issue to any such outdoor agent appointed by him a certificate of appointment in the prescribed form specifying the polling station in respect of which the candidate, the agent is appointed. And where in many cases, returning officers, election day workers, auxiliary, or one-day police and members of security forces are prevented these said agents from effectively carrying out the function for which they were appointed. The law says there should be, and where section 77, subsection 1 of the Representation of People Act does not specify, does not apply to the outdoor agent. I'm asking that section 41A, subsection 3 be amended to allow the outdoor agent to stay less than the 20 yards away from the polling station. There are cases where they put the outdoor agent around the corner, where they can't see what's happening. If they are appointed by the candidate and the roper makes provision for them, they should be within the precinct of voting, by the door of the polling station, where they can effectively carry out the duties for which they were appointed. Therefore, I'm asking that 41A subsection 1 be amended to allow the outdoor agent to be within the precinct of the voting. Private members motion number 4, where section 33 of Representation of People Act specifies that the poll shall be taken in each polling station between the hours of 7 o'clock in the forenoon and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And whereas there are many changes to the circumstances which influence the setting of the time for polling, and whereas we are now in an electronic age, be it resolved that section 33 of the Representation of People Act be amended, allowing the time for polling on election day to be between the hours of 7 in the forenoon and 6 in the afternoon. There are many establishments that do not allow the 2 hours for workers to go and vote. And it prevents these voters, these electors, from casting a vote for the candidate. So by closing at 5, when work ends at 4:30 at 5, it robs these electors of a chance or the opportunity to cast their ballots. I'm asking that we amend section 33 to make it that the poll opens at 7 in the forenoon until 6 in the afternoon. Private motion number 5, where section 44, subsection 3 of the Representation of People Act states, if in the course of counting the votes, any ballot paper is found with this counterfoil still attached thereto, the presiding officer shall carefully concealing numbers thereon from all persons present, and without examining them himself, remove and destroy such counterfoil, he shall not reject the ballot merely by reason of his former failure to remove the counterfoil. Be it resolved that this section be amended to add, or the counterfoil have been removed above or below the perforated line. There are times when the perforation are not properly done. Therefore, in removing that counterfoil, it is torn above and below the line. It should not be that is rejected. It is not the fault of the elector that the presiding officer may be in incompetence or because it was not it was not perforated properly. It is torn above or below. The ballot must be counted because it has nothing to do with the elector why it was not torn properly. So I'm asking that this section be amended. So wherever it is stored, the ballot should be a valid ballot. Previous members, motion number 6. Whereas a partial certification of the voters list was done more than 15 years ago, and whereas the current voter list reflects a distorted number of actual electors in Jamaica, but instead an inflated number. And whereas the number given after election as a voter turnout do not reflect the true percentage. Be it resolved that the government immediately provides the funds necessary for Electoral Office of Jamaica to embark on a total revocation of voters in Jamaica. We can't have a voter list that it is not something you can rely on. So talking about voter apathy is rubbish, because what we have in the list does not reflect the true number of the electors in the country. And it's high time for us to do a total revocation or re-enumeration of voters in this country. I'm asking that this Parliament calls on the government to provide the funds necessary to immediately start re-verification of voters in this country. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member who spoke on the private member's motion, please note, you did not include number 7, but I believe the date was later, so it allows for you to speak at another time. House Leader.
Yeah, so Madam Speaker, the member has started a debate on all 6 motions. We will suspend the debate. I'm sure other members may want to participate, so we'll suspend the debate today. Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today. However, on this motion for adjournment, there is a matter that I will have to read into the record, Madam Speaker, based on the nature of it. In our last sitting, when the Prime Minister gave his presentation in relation to Hurricane Melissa recovery efforts, he did indicate that the government would move to establish a joint select committee akin to the COVID-19 joint select committee to provide oversight of the recovery effort. And he did highlight that we would come to the House today to name that joint select committee. In light of that, Madam Speaker, I will read these 2 letters into the record. Dear Minister, and this letter is from the Leader of Opposition Business, Mr. Philip Paulwell. Dear Minister, during this presentation last Tuesday in Parliament, the Prime Minister announced the establishment of a joint select committee to provide oversight on matters relating to the operations for relief, recovery and reconstruction consequent to the devastation caused by Hurricane Melissa. He mentioned that you and I should consult on the terms of reference and the membership of the committee. On reflection on this matter, the opposition believes that such a committee would not be necessary and appropriate at this time, as it would be duplicating and usurping the role and function of the PAAC. Please be reminded that the main functions of the PAAC, as set out in Standing Order 73A, are A, examining budgetary expenditure of government agencies and other public bodies to ensure that expenditure is done in accordance with a parliamentary approval. B, monitoring expenditure as it occurs and keeping the Parliament informed of how the budget is being implemented. And C, inquiring into the administration of the government to determine hindrances to the efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for the improvement of public administration. We would therefore would also wish to state that a joint select committee involving members of the Senate in such an exercise would be unprecedented. Considering the above, we strongly urge the government to allow the existing arrangements for oversight in all aspects of the works related to Hurricane Melissa recovery be maintained. Best regards, Philip Paulwell, and this letter was sent on Friday, November 7th by electronic mail. I will now read the government's response under my signature, Madam Speaker. Reference is made to your email dated November 7th, 2025. I must express deep concern and disappointment at the opposition's sudden change in position. This reversal is particularly surprising, given that during your press conference on November 3rd, 2025, the leader of the opposition explicitly called for additional oversight of the process. It has always been our position that Parliament already provides adequate and robust oversight through established committees such as the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, PAAC, and the Infrastructure and Physical Development Committee, both of which are mandated to ensure transparency and accountability. In fact, the Infrastructure Committee has already called for a meeting to begin its work in this regard. The Prime Minister's decision to establish a joint select committee was aimed at fostering national consensus and unity, and in direct response to the opposition's public call for greater oversight. The precedence for this approach was established during the COVID-19 pandemic, when a similar oversight committee was appointed to consider the COVID-19 pandemic and related matters. It is therefore both perplexing and troubling that the opposition now appears to be retreating from its own stated position. Such inconsistency not only undermines constructive engagement, but also shows that the opposition is not able to take a clear and principled stance on these matters. In light of your indication that you will not be supporting the establishment of the Joint Select Committee, we will proceed in accordance with the existing parliamentary orders. We will make the existing standards and structures of the parliamentary system work. The government remains committed to transparency, accountability, and collaboration, but we urge the opposition to adopt a consistent and coherent position so that meaningful progress can be achieved in the national interest. Under my signature dated November 7, 2025. Madam Speaker, I now move that this sitting be adjourned for a date to be set.
Members, the question is that this Honorable House will now adjourn for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. This Honorable House now stands adjourned.